Let's get to it. The U.S. Supreme Court heard a Colorado-based case focused on religious freedoms versus discrimination this week. The case stems from a Lakewood baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple back in 2012. Patty, we have heard a lot about this case. Much was made about the questions from Justice Kennedy. Everyone seems to think he's going to be the swing vote. He has been on a lot of tight issues. Do you think he's the swing vote on this, and what did you make of what we heard?
I think he probably will be the swing vote. I'll leave some of this to the lawyers. I have to say, the longest running case, 5 years? And one of the fascinating things to me is that Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop, calls himself a cake artist, which gets you into a kind of different area of free speech than if you just happen to be a business that is offering wedding services. So if a country club refused to, or a public place you can rent for a wedding, refused to let a same-sex couple be there, they would be in trouble unless, I guess, they were venue artists, in which case maybe they could also refuse to do it. I'm hoping the Supreme Court comes down on the side of the fact that you are not allowed to discriminate, that if you are a business offering a service, you offer it to everyone.
David, you're one of our two esteemed lawyers at the table. As you've seen the case come down, and as people don't know, David actually has experience when arguing in front of the Supreme Court. So from what you saw and the case as you know it, who has the stronger chance? What do you think we're going to see when the decision comes down probably later this year, maybe even in June?
Well, I'm looking forward to this principle being applied to Westward when it will no longer be able, since it offers the business service of advertising and the Caldera ads of the I am so sexy, buy my 2018 semi-nude calendar, and they have no ability to turn it down.
Are you kidding? We'd sell it to
That is true. That is true. There's all kinds of different orientations out there. In standard constitutional law precedent, the strongest case for the baker is in First Amendment law, in the sense that he says, of course, if you're gay and you want to walk in and buy a cake off the shelf, help yourself, but I won't do special decorations for things that are contrary to my religion. Like, he won't sell Halloween cakes, which cost him a lot of money, or he doesn't make cakes that contain alcohol. This is part of the same kind of thing. And you can argue that, but he's got a respectably strong case on the First Amendment. But Justice Kennedy's interest in the case seemed to go in another direction. Just as the whole gay rights jurisprudence that exists in this country is Justice Kennedy opinions, starting with Romer v. Evans overturning a Colorado law from a couple decades ago. And Kennedy, rather than building on standard precedent and then taking it further, has really invented this whole new branch of law, of constitutional law, which is ultimately based on his application of the Catholic principle of the human dignity of the individual person. And so and therefore the government has to treat individuals with a certain amount of respect. And that gets us from overturning the Colorado law, banning local anti-discrimination laws, up through creating a right of gay marriage. He seemed to be signaling, I think, in some of his questions, that he was concerned that Colorado wasn't treating Jack Phillips with respect, including the contemptuous things that some of the so-called civil rights bureaucrats had said to him. And I think Justice Kennedy's ultimate point is, in a totalitarian society, there's only one correct or permissible way to think about things. And in a free society, we have pluralism, which means you can have gay marriage, but not everybody has to agree with it or participate in gay weddings, including as a vendor, if they don't want to do so.
Eric, I don't know what it is about Colorado. For better or for worse, we seem to find ourselves in the center of a lot of different gay rights issues. It was Amendment 2. It was a variety of other legal opinions. We just seem to have this kind of attraction, even though as a state we're pretty purple. It's not like we're in the Bible Belt or on the West Coast, anything like that. What do you think this is wherever the judgment goes, the ruling rather, later this year, how do you think it's going to affect how we look at this issue and politicize the issue here in Colorado?
It's a good question, Dominic, and I basically think the tipping point in Colorado and in much of the country was long since hit. I mean, there is increasing as year by year goes by acceptance of gay rights and gay marriage. I'm totally on board with that. I hope to go to a gay wedding in my own family at some point in the future. I think you do have to put this in the context of the time. This case did not come about yesterday. It came about in 2012. In 2012, gay marriage was not legal in Colorado. The Oglethorpe, I believe that's the name of the decision.
Obergefell.
Obergefell decision from the U.S. Supreme Court hadn't happened and didn't happen for a number of years. In July of 2012, when the dust up at the Masterpiece Cake Shop happened, it had only been a couple months after even President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden had come out in favor of gay marriage. It was not the law of Colorado. I probably on this one come down, I'll be curious to what the decision is. I come down a little closer to David than I do to Patty, which is not always the case. I do think we're in a mop-up action with some states left to be mopped up in terms of the public sentiment and public law on gay rights. But I do think in a pluralistic society, there needs to be more tolerance and more space for minority viewpoints. I do think the victors here, which is the gay rights side of the argument, need to maybe exercise a little more grace about allowing people to have an alternative viewpoint. I do not know why a gay couple would want a baker who's hostile to their viewpoint to make their wedding cake. There's not a shortage of bakers out there on any street in Denver or anywhere around Colorado. So if this one doesn't want to bake it for you, why do you want to force them to bake it as opposed to going to the other one 2 blocks down the road?
Penn, you are other esteemed lawyer at the table. What did you make of what we heard at the oral arguments, I guess it was Tuesday, and how do you think this is ended up going to be coming down as a ruling?
Not quite certain how it's going to come down, because I think Justice Kennedy is the swing vote, but he had questions that sort of cut in either direction. The more I think and reflect on it, I think he's troubled with the concept of public accommodation. Because one of the things that this case sort of harkens back to is back in the 50s and 60s, African American access to public accommodations, separate but equal. And it kind of goes to Eric's point. If you're having a same-sex marriage ceremony, why do you want a baker who is opposed to your proceeding to prepare the cake? And the same could be said, well, why do you want to stay in this hotel chain or have your guests stay over here versus the other one? Well, because the other hotel chain is better. And should you be precluded from having that option just because they're, opposed to your orientation? And I think that's where Kennedy may come down on this and struggle with it. And I think that the guiding principle is if you put yourself out as open for business to the public, you have to be open for business to all of the public.